So for Georgia Southern football, offensive breakdown for what you can expect. And again, there are things that may change, especially personnel, over the next couple of days and weeks. Only not even a week into camp yet.
They haven't had full padded practice.
Right.
That's not until tomorrow.
So tomorrow will be the first full padded practice over at Eagle Creek. So you'll get the gnats, you'll get the dragonflies, you'll get the whole shebang getting across the bridge. But start at the quarterback position, because this is probably the one that has the most change in it on the offensive side, at least. Everybody has talked about, ever since he arrived on campus, Kyle Van Treese transferring in from Buffalo. There's a couple of others behind him that may be new names. Colton Fitzgerald coming in from Boise State has kind of settled in as that two. Connor Sigelski in that realm as well. There's going to be a lot of... Coach Helton talked about it at Media Day. Van Treese is your starting quarterback at this point in time. He has taken every rep with the one. He's your QB1 at this point in time. Now, he was also very transparent. That's subject to change week to week, as everybody is. But right now, Kyle Van Treese is your QB1. But there's going to be some competition between who is the QB2. And we've seen Georgia Southern football, and obviously it's a very different scheme of what Georgia Southern's accustomed to. Quarterback, hopefully, not going to be taking quite as many hits as they were before. But you can't go into a college football season feeling good without a decent, at least, QB2. And I think you've got a lot of really good options to choose from if you're Clay Helton and that entire offensive staff.
And the reason why it's even more important, it's great to have Van Treese coming here from Buffalo. This is it. It's got 1 year.
Yeah.
So whoever steps in, that process of getting comfortable begins now. It doesn't take needing snap with the ones in a live game situation to say, okay, I can do this. That's why you have all these reps in spring ball. That's why you lift all these weights, all this conditioning, the nutrition, the film. Everything has a way of fitting together. So if your chance comes up maybe earlier than you were expecting, you're not surprised by it. You're already ready to go. Sigelski started the final 2 games last year. I know it was a different system. He's looked pretty solid so far. He's got the fleetest feet, I think, of everybody in the quarterback room. Van Treese would have something to say about that, but hopefully he doesn't have a chance to worry about running very much. I've liked Colton Fitzgerald so far. I wasn't sure how he was going to mix in. Didn't get a whole lot of opportunity at Boise State. Hank Bachmeier has been their starter for the last 3 years. Coming back east, looking for an opportunity. Him and Sigelski have split the reps with the twos. But Van Treese is not only the guy, but it's his room. And for somebody to come in this quickly, take over that room, take over this offense as they look to him as a leader. And you look at somebody who hasn't taken a snap here. He represented the team at Media Day.
Yeah.
That's what they think of him.
Yeah. And like I said, there's going to be competition, and it may not be somebody as QB2 for the entire year, and it may be a floating situation if you have to go to your backup of what the situation is. There may not be a set backup quarterback, quote-unquote, between Fitzgerald, Sigelski. You even throw in somebody like a Kyle Toole transferring in from Troy. He's taking some snaps on the offensive side. You've got a lot of different ways you can go in order to get the ball to the quarterback.
And for Toole, he was in the discussion to be in the quarterback rotation going into last year, but he had the wrist injury, ended up leaving the team. At Statesboro's benefit, second time in the last few years that Georgia Southern's picked up a former Troy quarterback, going back to Will Lovett. Also a freshman like Zach Roseman. Richie Langford is a transfer from the College of San Mateo in Southern California. Not going to get a chance to see much David Dallas. He's still rehabbing from the offseason surgery and the injury. How he's going to get worked in, that remains to be seen. And how everybody else adapts to wanting to be the number 2.
Yeah.
You have to look at this as, I may not get to play a whole lot, but if I'm not ready to play when my number gets called, I may not get to play a whole lot after that.
Yeah.
This is an ever-evolving situation. It's Van Treese. There's no doubt about that. This is Van Treese's offense to run. But for everybody else, you're fighting for the 2, but that could quickly become a lot more if the situation presents.
On the running back side for Georgia Southern football, you know what you've got, and obviously a couple of weeks ago, word came out of J.D. King retiring from the game of football. Obviously, this was more of a surprise to folks outside the FOC, but you still had to kind of shift of what your focus was. And you have guys like Gerald Green, Jalen White, even a guy like A.J. Brown who has been in this program, but a lot of different ways that you can go about it from the running back perspective as well.
I felt bad for JD, but
Yeah.
you could kind of feel it coming. He didn't really do much during the spring. He basically became a coach on the field. And for him to make the announcement, at least it takes some of the secrecy out of it, so you don't have to wonder if he's going to be getting snaps, if he's going to be back at some point this year. I'm excited to see what Gerald Green can do coming in as the guy, because he's had a slow start each of the last 2 years. But you think to 2020, he exploded against Troy with the long run. Last year was against the Cajuns when he went for almost 200 and those 3 touchdowns in game number 4. Jalen White, we've been waiting for him to be a consistent part of the offense. He's had his spurts, whether it was Arkansas State or Texas State. He was a big reason why Georgia Southern won both of those games, 2 of the 3 last year. But then how do you incorporate an A.J. Brown, who's been waiting on scout team for a couple of years, somebody who's 100% every time he's touching the football, former walk-on from Harlem, which has produced a lot of talent for this program. But then deeper down the line, it's Tyler Jordan transferring in from Georgia Military. It's Robert Edwards III. It's Omari, now going by O.J. Arnold. And I'm glad they're doing that, because instead of Omari and Amari, you get O.J. Arnold. He looks to be the quickest guy in that running back room out of Brooks County, somebody that may have a chance immediately, may have to wait his turn. But also, Terrence Gibbs is someone that's going to attract a lot of attention when he gets healthy.
Yeah.
He's coming off the knee injury, which is why teams kind of went away from him. He was still committed to Florida, changed that at the very end. Billy Napier takes over. He doesn't continue with the commitment. He reopens things. That's upcoming to Georgia Southern. That one may take a little bit longer to get involved, but simply looking at him physically at practice, he is not built like somebody you would expect at Georgia Southern.
No. And not being that young at Georgia Southern.
He is one of the most put-together running backs I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And that's out of pads. So when the chance is given to wear pads and get back to doing what he wants to do, which is the reason why he came here, it might be more passing this year, but looking in that room and seeing all that talent, it's an embarrassment of riches if you're assistant coach Matt Merritt.
You look at wide receivers for Georgia Southern, you expected to see a lot of transition, a lot of differences in this room, but you have some, but there's not as much transition and changeover. There's different positioning, and there's different ways different folks are being used, but it's the same characters for the most part that you've seen in years past. It's just they're used a little bit different. You look at a guy like Caleb Hood, he went from that slot. Was he a running back? Was he a slot? Was he a wideout? What was he going to do? And we've talked about it a lot between him, Amari Jones kind of in the same boat. You have to get them the ball. They're too good to not get them the ball. It was just a matter of how were you going to do it. Now they're strictly running, or wide receivers rather. Now you've got to get them the ball through the air. And you've got guys looking up and down this wide receivers room. There's a lot of talent. There's a lot of speed in this room. Caleb Hood, Amari Jones, Derwin Burgess, who had a huge year at the end of the year for Georgia Southern last year, and a big part of the successes that Georgia Southern did have last year. Sam Kennerson, the converted quarterback that went to wide receiver in the middle of last year. Darius Lewis had a couple of big plays last year for Georgia Southern. And then you do add a couple of new faces. Jeremy Singleton comes in from Houston. J.J. McAfee transferring in from Georgia Military. Marcus Sanders, a freshman, coming in from Montezuma. And then Parker Self, kind of working with the twos the last week or so, transferring in from Florida State. There is so much talent in that wide receiver room.
And that's the reason why when you've got a transition like this from an option scheme to more of a balanced spread, more emphasis on pass for sure, but it's going to be more when you're used to running the ball 50 to 55 times per game. But with the talent that was already here, plus the infusion of what this staff has been able to do, that's why I don't know that this is going to take as long to get comfortable as what usually is the case. Now, it happens different speeds everywhere, but it's not usually as drastic of a change. It would be more so if you were going from the under center flex bone to 5 wide. And look, that's happened at Georgia Southern before, and there's a reason why that didn't go as well as it could have, because you literally had to look for a different kind of player. And I know that's been 10, 15 years, but at the same time, what was recruited still is working, because you had this need to find out what these guys could actually do. And I'll go back to Caleb and Amari for a minute. One thing I feel really safe in saying is that those two will not combine for one touchdown this year.
No.
If Georgia Southern is going to be successful, they are going to be heavily involved. And that one touchdown that the two of them scored was Caleb running the football on an option against Troy. So those two combined for no receiving touchdowns. That's not going to happen this year. Jeremy Singleton is going to draw a lot of attention. He can play in the slot as well. Derwin Burgess has put on weight. I can't tell for sure how much, but he looks noticeably bigger. I think Amari's up 15 pounds. By the way, he is at a really good camp. He might be the most impressive guy on the offensive side. And then for Sam Kenderson, now that he's healthy, we know what he can do speed-wise. Getting the ball in his hands, that's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
Once you fully learn the position, once you get fully settled, then that's what Ryan Applin can look at, Brian Elson can look at. That's what Clay Helton can look at to figure out, we got a lot of guys, but we're not going to pick the wrong thing with all this talent that we have.
And somebody that you can kind of throw into that room, technically a tight end, but you've seen Bo Johnson working a little bit more with the wide receivers, getting out from that traditional H-back right around the line. He's been able to split out into that slot, even get out a little bit wider at times. He's somebody that I think can have a absolutely huge year. I know Russ is a huge fan of Bo Johnson. A lot of us are. But he is somebody that you always talk about how much guys gain over the offseason. It looks like Bo has slimmed up a little bit, but a good kind of slim up. And being able to change his body to where he can go out wide if he needs to, but he can also has the built to him that he can still be that tight end and block for you like he's been used to the last couple of years.
And look, on the roster, he's still going to be listed as a tight end. Isn't as if he is going to be in the class of a Singleton or a Hood to make that change from tight end to wide receiver. Incidentally, J.J. McAfee has shifted to tight end for the 2022 season, so he will work with Bo along with Jace Hancock, and when Ethan Durham comes back from injury, that'll give them a lot more support to work with Coach Applin. But at the same time, there's not going to be a whole lot of hand-on-the-ground tight end work this year. That doesn't mean that tight ends won't be involved in this offense relative to the personnel grouping that Coach Ellis uses when he's deciding who to send into the game.
Also got a couple of new tight ends. You talked about Chase Hancock whenever he's able to come back. Dylan Snyder transferring in from the Citadel. Evan Lester, a freshman coming in from Dalton. So you've got a lot of different ways that you can use the tight end. And a lot of different body types of what you need your tight end to do will determine who's going to be the tight end in that package.
The one thing to note about the alignment of the tight end this year, and this was a big rule change that was revealed by coordinator officials John McDade in day 2 of Sun Belt Conference Media Day. Unfortunately, that was the West Day. We didn't have a chance to speak with him while we were in New Orleans. But if the tight end lines up as an H, which means he has some kind of shade on the tackle, he would still be eligible to cut. Now, I'm saying that because even though Georgia Southern has had an option in its tradition, cut blocking has been key. But in this case, if cut blocking is still involved in the run game, the only people that can cut now are the 5 interior offensive linemen in the tackle box. There's no second-level cutting. There's no sideline cutting. Anything outside that tackle box is illegal. But outside of the 5 that are lined up, if you're in an H position, which the slot back, if you have any kind of shade over the tackle, you are permitted to cut as long as it's part of your initial surge. If you're hand-on-the-ground tight end, you cannot do that. If you go in an over formation where, say, you've got 3 offensive linemen on one side, the true unbalanced, the third lineman, even though he is a lineman by build, he would be considered a tight end and would not be eligible to cut. So depending on when the tight end gets used, that's an important thing to watch, and I'm going to guess the teams that are run heavy, especially your option-specific teams, that's something that they're going to have to contest with because that's going to have that position and the philosophy coached so much differently than it has over the course of the last few years.
Talk about the offensive linemen, and it's very similar to what the wide receiver room looked like. You thought there were going to be a decent amount of change in the offensive line room. But you look at it, and a lot of the same names you've heard the last couple of years. Brian Miller, Logan Langmeyer, Khalil Crowder, Caleb Kelly. Names that you've heard the last couple of years, but in this new scheme, this looks like a different offensive line.
The one noticeable change is Brian Miller, having spent his first couple of years at tackle, he has bumped into left guard. Rasheed Miller, who looks the part, 6'7", better than 300 pounds, from the state of Florida, redshirted a year ago. He slid into left tackle for now. You've got a number of transfers representing Elon Marshall. We've talked with Danny Corbett yesterday as part of New to the GS Flock, and you can listen to those interviews with new guys to the program. They're up on social media via SoundCloud, but Corbett can play everywhere on the offensive line. Brian Ellis told us in one of the summer sit-downs that he's comfortable going with maybe up to 10 or 11 offensive linemen. And with an offense that's going to go as fast as this one is planning on being, you need a lot of big, healthy, in-shape guys to execute the pace that they're going to try to go at.
So we've gone through all of the position groups, but overall this offense, and I think you just talked about it, the biggest thing that you see from this group is the speed. And I'm not talking about once the ball is snapped. I'm talking about from once the previous play has ended till the next one gets snapped. There's not a whole lot of time in there.
Ideally, Ellis has also said that he's looking for 80 plays per game, whether that's 40 runs, 40 passes, 30, 50, 60, 20, whatever. However you got to get the win is what you're going to do.
Yeah.
But they're shooting for somewhere around 80 plays per game. Some perspective, nobody in the country ran 80 plays a game last year. North Texas was the highest at 79.
Oh, so close.
Seth Luttrell, they do think. So it might be ambitious, but if they can get settled early, and that's why I think having Morgan State at game one can work, because you can run your pace, do things your way. Yeah, Nebraska's week 2, whatever, we'll talk about them. But being able to see a team that may allow you to maximize what you've got on that side of the football at the same time, though, not showing a whole lot. And I know that that's a tough balance to strike. But the ability to do what you want to relative to what you put on film for the team that you're going to see the next week in Lincoln, and of course we'll preview Morgan State once we get there, but this is going to be a season of discovery for this offense, not week by week, but this is going to be a snap-by-snap thing that Brian Ellis and all these coaches are going to realize. They see what they have now 5 days into camp, but they're going to continue to find out what they have once they go full pad starting tomorrow and then going forward.
The thing that everybody is asking, everybody is talking to us about, and I'm sure asking everybody associated with Georgia Southern football in some way, shape, or form, what's the balance? What is the pass to run? Coach Helton has said since he got here, ideally, and it may take a couple of years to get to it, it'd be 60-40. There's been a lot of, and for those that have been out at practice, you've seen it, there's a lot of passing in these practices, but it's the point of emphasis that you've got to make in the preseason, because that's the biggest change. Yeah. That's not to say they're not running during practice. There's 2-3 whole periods devoted to the run game. There is a lot of passing, and kind of looking at it from the outside looking in, it looks like it's extremely pass heavy, which is going to be a lot more passing than what Georgia Southern folks are used to.
Absolutely.
But Coach Helton has said from the time he stepped foot off the plane in Statesboro, you don't have a running back room like this. You don't have athletes like this and not run the football.
You might see 40 passes a game sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's going to be more, sometimes it's going to be less, but most of the time, if you see between 30 and 40, you've also got 30 and 40 runs.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't automatically mean that you're balanced. To me, balance means you constantly keep that defense guessing so they can't get your tendency. So, okay, that doesn't mean run, pass. That way you've got 40 runs and 40 passes. If you're an option team, running the football is what you do, but you can dress it up a number of different ways so they can't exactly see where you're trying to do, who you're trying to block, who you're trying to key on. The idea of a passing game means that they've got to account for it, but you can still get in formations where a running formation might be max protect for a deep ball. You can get into a passing formation with 5 wides that turns into a quarterback draw. You could motion somebody in the backfield, create your dive like you've had. you might see a little bit of option.
Yeah.
That still could be part. And I think Coach Eldon has mentioned that a couple of times. It's not like you're burning that part of the playbook completely. Yeah. It's not going to be used a whole lot, but that still could be a part once they add more and more to this playbook. You might see 10 consecutive passes, which that might be how it is for a little bit. But the idea behind balance is once they think, I'm talking about the defense, once the defense thinks it has an idea, that's the ability to give the same look, but run the football.
There's something, and you talk about the deep ball. The deep ball looks really good from Kyle Van Treese. That much I can tell you.
Wings up.
Yeah, a lot of it. But I go back to something that Russ and I have talked about a lot over the last couple of years, and I don't know that it has necessarily been something that Georgia Southern has been able to do. It's been more of what Russ and I have said, this is what you would like it to be. But throwing the ball when you want to rather than when you have to. And you flip it to the other side, running the ball when you want to, not when you have to. Because there's been many opportunities over the last couple of years where you feel like Georgia Southern is backed into, okay, you've got to run the ball, whether it be because that's what the defense has given you or because the pass isn't working. On the flip side, you get into a 3rd and long, there's not a whole lot of dives that are called at that point. And so you've got to be able to do what you want to rather than what is predictable from the defense like you talked about. And I think that's going to be the biggest factor that Georgia Southern has been able to exploit this year, being able to do what you want to, not necessarily what you feel like you have to do and you're backed into a corner with.
And now you're in a spot where you can be really good or potentially really good at both.
Yeah.
Instead of having to be good at throwing the football, because when you're throwing it 10 to 15 times per game, most of the time, those are deep shots.
Yeah.
When option teams pass, they're going for home runs because the safeties are flying up, the corners are blitzing, trying to take away the dive, trying to negate the pitch or the QB run. Option pass typically means you're throwing the ball at least 25, 30 yards downfield. Now, though, with the way that this offense is being designed, you're going to see a lot of Gerald Green. You're going to see a lot of Jalen White. You might see a little bit of Hood and Amari Jones involved. When O.J. Arnold gets involved, when Tyler Jordan gets involved, because I think there's about 7 different guys that can handle the football at this point, it's going to tilt towards the pass. But the way that this is being built and the scheme that has been devised, because you've got a guy in Brian Ellis that even though it's being looked at as, well, Georgia Southern's going to throw the ball 50 times. He was at Western Kentucky last year. Bailey Zappi threw for over 5,900 yards and 60-some touchdowns. But those offenses were only successful because they had the ability to run the football to keep the defense honest.
Yeah.
And no running back situation that he has dealt with outside of maybe having Ronald Jones at USC, the running back room has never been as thick and as deep as it is in this situation here, at least with the allotment that this 22 team has. Jalen White has had his time. Gerald Green has had his time. A number of other guys are going to get their opportunities. This is still going to be a team that is going to need to run the football. That's going to be nice seeing Kyle Van Treese pick apart opposing defenses and watch these receivers show their true talent more than just 10 to 15 times per game.
Yeah.
But that's good.
Yeah.
Because that's only going to make that run game that much better.
Yeah. This is a offense that at the end of last year, and you knew you were going into this new system and you're kind of thinking to yourself, okay, what does this look like in year 1? You know what ideally it looks like in year 2, year 3, year 4 down the line. But what does it look like right now? I think you saw a good transition just in the spring and the short amount of time you had there. There's even more of that now that you get into fall camp. And Coach Helton has said anybody that can come out to fall camp, fall practices, whatever, you can come out tomorrow 10 to 12 at Eagle Creek. Again, we talked about it last week. Take a long lunch. You got a meeting at 9:30. There's no reason to get back to the office.
Everything's fine. It's the summer.
It's timing.
It's still the summer.
Right. Go ahead and come out to Eagle Creek tomorrow and be able to watch what this offense looks like.